Today on the Criss Cross Cinema Podcast, two films from wildly different genres, and even I don't know their connection. Spike Lee's 25th Hour and Gareth Edwards' The Creator on the Criss Cross Cinema Podcast.
Two fellows meet accidentally, like you and me. No connection between them at all. Never saw each other before. They swap murders. Criss Cross.
Wilson! I'm sorry, Wilson! A day may come when the courage of men fails, but it is not this day.
You gotta keep breathing, because tomorrow the sun will rise. Who knows what the tide could bring?
Hello and welcome to the Criss Cross Cinema Podcast, where we crisscross cinema history to find connections you may have never recognized. Try and spot them along with us. The link between these two films could be the tragedy of 9/11, but I'm just as in the dark as you are, because today is Mark's show, with 2002's 25th Hour and 2023's The Creator. Hi, I'm Aaron Wilson. I'm a director learning how to point.
And I'm Mark Klobus, a teacher who's learning how to choose films. So thank you for the introducing these as my choices, because up until now, we've been guided by Aaron's excellent cinematic sensibility. And I had some ideas, and he was very generous enough to say, why don't we try a couple of those out? And I think that...
Yeah, it's great to have you choosing them.
They're ones that also, I think, play to these films that I don't think have... Yeah, I shouldn't say this about a Spike Lee movie. I'm really saying this more about Gareth Edwards' movie, which is that it doesn't get quite the love it deserves.
Yeah.
Although I have to say, but we'll get to that movie.
Yeah, so getting ahead of ourselves.
Yes, just a little bit.
If you'd like to get access to bonus features and deleted clips from Criss Cross and our sister show, Facets of Story, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Transcend Entertainment. That's TRANSCEND Entertainment. On today's episode, as always, we'll review our two films, and at the end, we go crisscross to compare and contrast them both. But first... Mark, what media have you been consumed by?
Well, this a couple days ago, I finally watched Ghosted, which was the 2023 movie with Chris Evans and Ana de Armas, I think is how you pronounce it.
Yeah, Armas, yeah.
And, oh man, it was definitely not the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
It's a film I wanted to like so much better than I did.
Yeah, the premise looks so great, but yeah.
Premise looks great. It just is so stacked with acting talent. You've got Tim Blake Nelson, you've got Adrian Brody, you've got this sheaf of cameos in it, and it just doesn't gel. It's like the ingredients are there, and they're all like the finest ingredients, and it just feels like it didn't bake long enough.
Yeah, or a cake where the eggs are just separate from everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a nice looking movie, and it's well made. Just doesn't quite come together as well as it should.
That's too bad.
How about you?
Well, I've been playing a video game.
Oh, which one?
Jurassic World Evolution 2. Mm-hmm. Movies aren't so great, but the game's fun. It's a park builder. The one that I'd played before is Jurassic Park Operation Genesis, and that one is a lot better in a lot of ways, but this one has better graphics and probably improved in other ways. But I didn't get very far into it. But it was exactly the stress reliever I needed, though. I haven't played a video game in the longest time, and I've been going on the show and different things, and I stopped to play a video game, and I'm like, I am enjoying this way too much.
I find the same thing. I'm not much of a video game player, but when I do play, I do really binge, and I definitely can get the relief. The idea of the relief that it provides in terms of just the distraction. So.
And there's just the magic of your escaping into another world, and you have full control over it.
Especially when that is about you designing that world, as opposed to just playing in someone else's.
Yeah, and it sparks some ideas for possible Jurassic Park scenes, or maybe not full movies, but I thought of like a movie where they have to trek across the entire island to do a mundane task. Mm-hmm. And that sounds boring as crap, but just remember like the first Jurassic Park, there's the scene where she has to get to the power station and she has to get through the Velociraptor cage. Mm-hmm. One of the most intense scenes in the movie.
Are you talking park or world?
Park.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I was in Jurassic World neighborhood. So
yeah, I mean, Jurassic Park, I've seen the 3 parks. I saw most of World. And I think the thing that bugged me most about World was the fact that I felt like it was just repeating Park.
Yeah.
But with more people to eat.
Yeah, definitely.
So.
And they I don't think they made the best use of that premise before they threw it away for the second one. But.
And it gets back to exactly what you're describing, which is that, yeah, a mundane plot could have opened up a lot more than it did.
Yeah.
It's like, we're going to have a fully functioning park. There's so much more you can do with it, but let's just go ahead and repeat the first movie because that's what's going to make us, that's the easiest path to the money.
Yeah. Bigger isn't necessary, better.
Exactly.
So, okay. We got a fun episode planned. A lot of filmmaking insights today, and it's going to be I think it's going to be really fun. But first, a disclaimer. So our first movie, 25th Hour, has an objectionable subplot, an inappropriate relationship between a teacher and a student. Thankfully, it treats it as a bad thing, but it does contain it. And we will not be covering it because Mark's point really has nothing to do with it. Okay, going forward, we're going to use the same standard that we use for making our films that we do for watching them. So, 1, the good guys stay the good guy to the very end. 2, the message is uplifting. 3, we'll be sticking mainly to PG-13 neighborhood. I will be vid-angeling any R-rated movies that match our standard. An example of one that matches is The Shawshank Redemption. One that does not is The Joker. Evil messages can't be vid-angeled. We also won't be covering PG-13s with evil messages either, such as The East, which is a pro-eco-terrorist movie. Okay, now we're going to unveil Transcend Entertainment's mission statement. We're unveiling it for the first time here. So, forgive me if I get a little emotional for this. This is cool. Okay. Now, Transcend Entertainment's mission statement. Transcend Entertainment is an independent film studio that functions under 4 storytelling rules. 1, the good guys stay the good guys to the very end. 2, the message is uplifting. 3, the main character has an interesting condition or situation. 4, we use the PG-13 rating like a razor to trim the fat of inappropriate content. The world is filled with entertainment that does not feed the soul. We strive to aim a little higher. We are Transcend Entertainment. Now, without further ado, our review of 25th Hour.
Be warned, here there be spoilers.
Oh, right. I'm dropping my stuff.
So my question is, how familiar are you? Did you have any familiarity with the story or the movie before?
I did not. I had to watch the trailer. I knew about, I haven't seen any Spike Lee movies, but of course I know about him by reputation, but I hadn't ever heard of this movie. So
it's fascinating how the stature, when I was doing some research about it, the stature of this film is very odd in the sense that it makes a lot of lists, not just as one of Spike Lee's best movies, but also one of the best, if not even the best movie ever made about New York City. And yet, when people talk about Spike Lee, there's certain titles they just rattle right off. Do the Right Thing. Malcolm X. They will talk about those. And for some reason, not Inside Job. Sorry, 25th Hour.
It's another good one.
Yes,
we might cover that one at some point.
It's great.
Great heist movie. I want to do something on heists. But
and it's such a wonderful example of one. But 25th Hour, it's like people have to kind of get past 3 or 4 more prominent projects before they mention it. And it is fascinating how it has, and I've noticed as well, because one of the ways that I acquire, that I find the films to watch this because I'm cheap is I go to the library, I try to check them out, and it wasn't available in any of the libraries that I checked. I was looking at some used DVD places, and none of them had it. It's a film that's there, and yet it's not. And I think it's
kind of disappeared.
Yeah, it is. It's weird in that respect. And
it makes sense why I hadn't heard of it then.
Yeah. I mean, I eventually, I finally just, coughed up the, $3 or $4 it took to rent it on via streaming. But it was, it was weird how, for all of the praise that it received and for the prominence of the people involved in it, how it's just not, more visible. as a film compared to a lot of other Spike Lee's work.
Right.
And then to find out afterward that it was, one, based upon a novel, and two, that the author went on to a very prominent career in doing Game of Thrones. He was a producer in that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
David Benioff. And it was like, wow.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. I know that guy.
Yeah. And it was like, so again, why isn't this more prominent? Because the novel itself is still in print, and the novel itself, and that I was, ironically enough, maybe not ironically, but funnily enough, I was able to get a copy of that without a problem.
Yeah.
But it's just, again, all these names, you've got, a couple of future Oscar winners in it. It's just, but it's just, you don't see it anywhere. So
yeah.
One current, one former, one future. So
yeah, sometimes the elements just don't align for certain things, but yeah, that's too bad.
But it is a film that, to me, stands out in a lot of ways. And it's one of the reasons why I chose it, because it is a film. It's very much a film of the moment.
Right.
And it's interesting how, in that respect, it is substantially different than the source material.
Mm-hmm.
You read the novel, and the plot of the movie follows the plot of the novel almost exactly.
Oh, wow.
And yet at the same time,
That's rare.
yeah. And at the same time, though, it is substantially a different project.
How long is the novel? Usually it works better with shorter novels.
It's about 220 pages.
Okay, not too
At
bad.
least the edition I read was. So, but what is just amazing to consider that it is both at one at the same time a pretty faithful adaptation of the novel. And yet it is something that is very uniquely Spike Lee, not just in terms of his movie making style, but also in terms of the message that he inserts in it, which is why I chose it for this podcast today. So without further ado, let us get into the
movie.
Yeah.
It kind of opens pretty brutal with
It
the
does.
sounds of a dog being beaten.
And then you have another sound that some people might also regard as brutal, which is the roar of a muscle car engine.
Yeah.
And that's the first scene that you see, which is the car driving down the street, and then it stops and these two men get out. And the two men are Monty Brogan and Kostya Novotny. And you don't know anything about who they are or what they're doing, but Brogan stops. He's the driver. He sees the dog. Initially, he says he wants to put it out of its misery, but when he is about to do it, the dog snaps back, and he decides that he has he's impressed by the dog's fight. Mm-hmm. And Kostya is more dismissive of the idea of saving the dog, and he invokes what he calls, he's invoking Murphy's Law, but he calls it Doyle's Law.
Yeah.
This is where the dog's name comes from.
Yeah, this guy's really funny.
And right there, you get this interesting contrast that's going to play out later in the movie, which is that Monty, though he's tough, there is a sensitive core.
Right.
And Kostya is more willing to, make tough choices if he thinks that's what's in the best interest.
Right.
And that plays out. And then you get the opening credits. And this is where you start to see the first visible reference to 9/11.
Yeah, and these credits are haunting even before you recognize that it's about 9/11, because it's just these spotlights that are turning on, and you have no idea what they are until it reveals at the end. They shoot up into the air, and you see the two towers of the Twin Towers, but just, you've seen it before, just those lights going infinitely off into the sky, and it's haunting.
The tribute in light, which was a temporary display,
right,
and has since been replaced, but it is very much. And one of the reasons why I love his use of it is not just the 9/11 reference, but it really centers it as being very much a film of the moment.
Right, very much. Yeah.
Like
even now, there's a certain scene that we'll get to that just felt like so. Oh man, it might be too much, but in a good way.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But it is, and this gets to one of the things that distinguish the core thing that distinguishes the novel from the movie, which is that the novel was published in 2000.
Right.
It is very much an artifact of the pre-9/11 era, and yet Spike Lee made a conscious choice to make to set the novel in the aftermath of 9/11, as we'll see. And he signals that with that, those amazing opening credits.
Yeah.
And
I'll mention right here, there's a radical tone shift from the brutal opening with the dog that's dying from being beaten up and they're saving it, to these just really calm, still credits with this music over it. And it's only when those lights light up and that score kicks in that it's like, oh, like 9/11, like it's just got this haunting feel to it.
Yeah. The music, there's definitely a mournful tone.
Right.
And it works not just with the credits, but also with what's happening in the movie.
Yeah. It also makes a great hook for the movie of you're like, okay, what does this have to do with 9/11?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when the credits are over, you see Monty, it's further in time because now Monty has the dog and the dog is healthy.
Right.
And he is approached by a junkie. And this is when you discover you see that Monty is in fact a drug dealer. I think there's a brief reference to it when he's recovering the dog, but you discover that not only is he a drug dealer, but he has been busted.
I'm just going to step aside real quick. And this is one of the things that would probably disqualify it from our regular list of its, and I'll cover this as we go along. It'll be really interesting. Of the good guy is not really the good guy. Like he's on the wrong side of the law, and they do everything to justify that. And I'll cover that along the way.
Well,
but, yeah,
there's something that happens in the scene that actually informs what you're going to be doing.
Right.
And it's in the person of the junkie. And so I would suggest that you kind of, put a mental pin there because we'll be returning to him a little bit later.
Okay, cool.
But Monty says he's been, and the terminology is fascinating. He's been touched. And I don't know if that's something specific because I've never heard or seen that before in description. But he's not only has he been busted, but he is 24 hours away from going to prison.
Right.
And this is his last day of freedom before his life is going to irrevocably change.
Right.
What you're seeing is a person who, and this is where I have to, it's a great cast. It's not a huge cast, but the actors are well chosen. This was the origins of this project was the person who started this was Tobey Maguire.
Oh, really?
And he initially was supposed to, he envisioned himself playing Monty Brogan. And he got sucked into, speaking of 9/11 adjacent projects, Spider-Man.
Oh, yeah.
And so they decided to, that was when Edward Norton was cast as Monty Brogan. And so, but he does this, you're seeing him after he, tells the junkie to, basically go to Harlem. And the guy's like, well, I can't because I don't know anybody there. Well, that's his problem, not Monty's. Yeah. Monty's got his own problem, which is the fact that he's about to go to prison. So he's going through this last day of freedom, and he's doing this walk, and he just does this nice job, I think, of like he's savoring everything.
Right.
This is his last full day. He's savoring this walk. He passes by these prep school students on his way to this to go to this prep school, and you get something that Benioff develops more in the novel, which is the fact that he was this working class kid. He goes to this prep school on a scholarship, and he gets thrown out because of a fight. They briefly mention the fight,
right?
But he's not there just to relive it. He's there to meet his friend, Jacob Alinsky. And
before we get to that, let me just jump back real quick to the inciting incident. You covered it, but glazed over it real quick. The DEA agent that comes in, that like right when he opens the door, I don't know if it's the music or what, but there's just an instant sense of dread when the door opens. I don't know how they did that, and I'm a filmmaker. I'll have to dissect it, I guess. But it opens the door and you're like, oh, bad news. Maybe it's just her reaction to it. That's probably it.
I think it's a combination of that and the fact that it's Isaiah Whitlock who plays that DE agent.
But before you even see him, like you get that sense. But then he walks in the door, and this guy is just a slime ball, like deliciously so.
Yeah.
And this is part of the okay.
Well, I was actually going to get to that scene a little bit later on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's cover it then. Yeah.
So he's at the school, and what you see in the first scenes is you're seeing the construction of you're seeing Monty's friend circle.
Right.
He has these, and it's implied that he has these two friends who he trusts absolutely. One of them is Jacob Belinsky, who he and Monty met at the prep school, and Jacob is not a working class kid. His father was well off. He was there, was part as a tuition paying student, and now he's a teacher there.
Yeah.
And it kind of, I thought it was interesting in the sense that you really get the sense that he's a person who it's his comfort zone, and he's very reluctant to get out of it.
Right.
And I think that's something that's played up later when in the movie where the choice of fashion.
And of course, who is he played by? Oh.
He's played by Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yeah. Late great Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yeah. Who is, this was when he was taken off. And I have to say that he is arguably of the central characters, the most inessential one. Yeah.
That's for sure.
And to me, as I'm watching it, I'm thinking it is such a crying shame because he is such a good actor. And this is no shade on the other actors, particularly Barry Pepper, but I could so see him.
Which one is Barry Pepper?
He's the one. He plays Frank Slattery.
Okay, Frank. Yeah, do not like Frank. But
yeah, exactly. But I mean, to me, it's a testament to Philip Seymour Hoffman that I could imagine him in any one of those roles, and I think he would have pulled it off to perfection.
Yeah, for sure.
And I feel like he wasn't quite this. He didn't have quite the stature when they did this film that he was accumulating. Yeah, but nonetheless, it still feels like that. It's not the best use of it. I mean, what he does great, but it's like I wanted him to be more central to the movie because he's so darn good. Yeah. But you have him, you see him interacting with this student, Mary D'Annunzio, and it's played by Anna Paquin. And it's another example of the sheer quality of this cast, because that was, she had already won her Oscar, of course, and she does a fine role, but it's not an essential role.
Yeah, and let me mention the costume design real quick here. Mm-hmm. Of like everybody in the class is wearing like grays and blacks. Mm-hmm. She's wearing this red t-shirt, and like the light is just very subtly highlighting her, and your eye is just drawn to her. Like that's great cinematography, but also just costume design.
And it's especially great in that it allows Lee to do something that Benioff has to elaborate upon more explicitly in the novel, which is that Mary D'Annunzio is Jacob's star student.
Right.
There are scenes in the novel that aren't in the movie where he talks about how, 10 years from now, he's going to be talking about how Mary D'Annunzio was his student in the sense that she was going to become a famous writer, or at least a renowned writer. And that, Lee, who, strikes me as being a very efficient filmmaker, and he worked with Benioff on the script. He, does that not through the scenes, but through that setting. I must confess, I didn't pick up on that until you just mentioned it, but it does, underscore how, of the students, Mary D'Annunzio is the one to watch.
Yeah, that's true. I don't remember a single one of those other kids' faces, so they did a good job of that.
Yeah, they were anonymous. So, and of course, Mary is, they also make clear that she knows she's a gifted writer, and you have a scene which is taken from the novel where she's complaining about the fact that she received a B+ on a writing that she was proud of, and she felt that a lesser writer received an A, and she was critical of that. So you're getting a sense of the tension there, but you're also getting the sense that Jacob is trying to explain why he's trying to help her, and you could tell he admires her greatly. So, but then you cut to a trading room, another area of New York,
Stress galore.
Exactly. And that's when you meet Frank Slattery and you see how he, his situation. He is the other friend and he...
Yeah, let me cover this real quick and then we'll move on. Okay, cinematography and filmmaking here is just spot on in the worst way possible. Like it's just got this green tone to it. Like that's what color grading is, where you just, and it's motivated by the fluorescent lighting, but it's really just upped to the nines. Just has this green tone to it, and it opens on his bloodshot eyes, and he's squishing this stress ball, and it's like that thing is doing nothing. Like that's what it's there for, to show like he thinks he's de-stressing, but he's really just high stress the whole time.
He's totally on edge. Again, it's something that is developed a bit more explicitly with an internal monologue in the novel, but they managed to translate it so effectively with just visuals.
Yeah, and it's just contrast of, look, here's a stress ball. Oh yeah, this is a stressful situation. It doesn't feel like he's de-stressing here.
And the release only comes with the fact that this risky decision that he made is vindicated, and you're getting it communicates the sense that Slattery is he's on the way up.
Yeah, and you do get the sense that this is his lifestyle, especially from the line that his boss says, where they're having this big argument to the audience. It's like, oh, this is horrible. And then at the end of it, like, you going to the game Saturday with me? And it's like, yeah. It's like, this is their life. This is what they do all the time.
But it gets to one of the themes that you see in the story, which is there's this element of risk.
Yeah.
And you're seeing three people who are at different stages of it. That Slattery is engaging with risk, and he's definitely feeling the stress, but currently it's paying off for him.
Right.
And you have Jacob, and this gets to the questionable subplot, who is being tempted to take a risk.
Right.
But he's comfortable with his life, so he's very cautious about it. Monty, by contrast, he had taken the risk and it had ended badly for him.
Yeah.
And he's about to pay this horrible price for it that is looming over him. And it's one of those things where there are alternatives that get spelled out a little bit later in the movie, but none of them are good.
Right.
All of them are basically one form or another of punishment for having taken the risk of being a drug dealer and suffering the consequences of that.
Right.
So, but then Monty gets home and you meet Naturel.
Yeah.
And it's Rosario Dawson.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, right around the time that she was really making a name for herself. I think Josie and the Pussycats followed this, and she was one of the co-leads in that. And again, she's just so amazing in this role. You get
just effortless performance.
Yeah. I mean, and you convey the sense of, Monty's depressed. You get the sense that Naturel's concerned for him, but you also get a sense that he is holding her at arm's length. And there's a reason for that kind of plays out over the movie, which is that there's this question that
and he's depressed at this point, knowing he's going to jail.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think the depression is in part informed by the fact that he doesn't know how he got caught. And this gets to the flashback scene where you see Monty and Naturel in happier times. They're being intimate, and that's when the DEA shows up. And
was that a flashback? I didn't realize that. Okay, that's why it confused me.
Yeah,
but it's a great inciting incident. You want me to?
You go ahead.
Go on with this. Yeah. So this is a great lesson in audience manipulation, because he's like, it would be so easy to see him as the bad guy, but what they do is they take this DEA agent, they make him the biggest slime ball, like entertainingly so. Like he's, just some of the lines he says are just, I don't know, so good. But they do a great job with it. And I'm going to point out some other audience manipulation in the creator that isn't done so well, but it's a great comparison. And I don't want to take away from your main point, but
I'm looking forward to that comparison because I must confess that I am looking forward to finding something that it sounds like I probably missed, but yes,
it'll be fun.
But yeah, and what's interesting about the raid, and again, this is paralleled in the novel, is that when the DEA shows up, they know where Monty keeps his stash. They know where the drugs are. They know where the money is. And they're toying with Monty.
Right.
So they're not so much searching as they're sauntering. And the Whitlock's character, the head DEA agent, he sits down. It's like, oh, the sofa feels uncomfortable.
Right, yeah.
And Monty is like, just get it over with. he knows he's been that somebody has turned him in, and he just doesn't know who it is. It's like, and the person most likely to have done it, given the knowledge the DEA had, was Naturel.
Right.
And so you're seeing this conflict that he can't resolve, which is exacerbated by this depression he's feeling about the fact that he's about to go to prison. Yeah.
Also, DEA agent, the dog hates him. It's good shorthand to make the audience hate a character.
Yeah.
So
and the dog is that's one of the dog is a very neat character, and
yeah, it's probably my favorite element of this movie.
And I especially like the way that Lee uses the dog at the end of the movie with one of the climactic scenes that we'll be getting to.
Right.
But then, so Monty decides he's going to leave Naturel. He's going to join up with her later. They're going to meet at a bar, but first he's going to go meet with his dad. And his dad is played by Brian Cox.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I saw that and I'm like, oh man, his dad's Brian Cox. Yeah.
And his dad owns a bar named Brogan's.
Right.
And when you open into the interior of the bar, what you see is a 9/11 memorial first.
Oh, I hadn't even noticed that.
Yeah, it was the firefighters, and that was not something that was fake or exaggerated. That was apparently a real life memorial. And
get some real power out of that.
Yeah. And it also underscores the fact that the Brogans' working class origins, the fact that this is a bar that serves working class guys, and Brian Cox pulls that off so effortlessly.
Yeah.
It gets to the range of this actor who's not even, American, he's Scottish.
Yeah. And I'm picturing the shot of him behind the bar, just casually watching the game and serving the guys.
Yeah.
You get the sense he's been there for a million years.
So. And he just plays this performance to perfection.
Yeah.
You have, they argue over dinner. Monty goes to the restroom, and that's when you get perhaps the most famous scene in the movie, which is Monty's monologue.
Oh, right. The F.
Where he's dropping F-bombs.
Everyone, yeah.
He's dropping F-bombs.
Okay, so it says, I'm going to cover cinematography here real quick. And I got a gripe with this scene, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
In the mirror when he walks in, it says F you in the bottom corner. He starts ranting about every single subclass of people in New York, saying F the blah blah for all these reasons, and you kind of see the reasons.
Yeah. He's going through all these New York cliches,
right?
This group and this group and this group, and it's so fascinating. It's taken from the novel,
right?
It's been tweaked a little bit.
Okay.
I don't know if Benioff did it or Lee did it or they did it in collaborations, but it's if anything, it's made a little edgier.
Yeah.
And yet there is this. There are two things in it that one of which I must confess takes me a while to grasp, and the other one, of course, I grasp it right away. And the one that's difficult to grasp is that it's actually affectionate.
Yeah, I did get that sense. Yeah.
It's the kind of the gripes that a New Yorker could have, that they gripe.
I feel like that's a Spike Lee insert.
Yeah, it's kind of like saying, these are the things I hate, but I'm going to miss them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it ends with the final F-bomb he drops is about himself. And
I hadn't catch that. Well, before that, okay. I'll cover it in a second, but yeah.
And that's where you hear him, you basically kind of recognizing, acknowledging openly what he probably has been thinking, which is that he screwed up.
Yeah.
He screwed up big time, and that he's not saying he's better than these people, but he's saying that he is one of them, and he really screwed up, and now he's going to pay the price for that.
Right.
There's one other thing that comes out in the monologue, and this was something that was added that wasn't in the monologue of the book, is that you also see him more openly expressing his doubts about Naturel.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Where he says, who probably turned me in.
Right.
And yet he's still planning to spend the evening with her.
Yeah. And this is a great segue to my gripe about the scene. So it's a radical style shift from the rest of the movie. It feels like it's out of a different film or even a documentary. It has a very documentary feel to it with all this footage of New Yorkers. They're looking into the camera, but it feels like they filmed real people. And it's like, okay, what are we doing here? And it goes on for so long, and it's just, I don't know. That's my biggest gripe of it. It's great as a standalone thing, but the style, anything that takes you out of the story, I kind of rail against. But it does bring it back around, which I admire. That it at the end it brings in the actual characters of the movie, and it's like F her, F him for blah 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 blah.
Yeah,
and then eventually it lands on himself.
And of course, they're going to call back to this scene later in the movie, and it gets to the new. It really underscores the New Yorkness of this. Right. That it isn't about these. In a sense, it's not just about these people who happen to live in New York. It really is a broader thing about New York itself, and that is from the novel. Okay, yeah. But Lee definitely takes it and amps it up for the benefit of the story. So.
Right. And also cinematography-wise, it does it in, let's see, is he looking in the camera? I don't think he is. But it's straight on at him looking in the mirror, and then it shows his reflection. And I think in the shots where it's over the shoulders showing his reflection, he's not moving. Like, it's only him in the mirror, so that shows it's inside his head. Yeah. It's a radically different cinematic style and just feel from the rest of the movie. So
it is.
For me, I wouldn't take that route, but it's the most Spike Lee thing that I think is in the movie. So
I think it's a genius way of how do you capture an internal monologue in a movie?
Yeah, that is a great way to do that.
And so many people, they just do like the voiceover.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
It's just so well done. In this, you have Monty looking at his reflection.
And the FU in the corner of being the instigator. I don't know if that's in the novel, but it's great storytelling of just the visual. It starts him on the rant.
Yes, it does,
and it's great. Just simple storytelling. So
and how he ends the scene trying to rub off.
Oh yeah, I'd forgotten that. Yeah.
So, and then he goes back out and he. Tells his dad he's leaving, and oh my gosh, Brian Cox kills this scene.
Yeah,
he is so good because he captures, and this is something that is played up in a bit more in the novel, which is his sense of regret.
Yeah, definitely.
That he is watching his son, who is his wife has died from cancer. The only time you see her is in a photograph.
Yeah, aside from Doyle, the dog, the dad is probably, well, I mean, he'd probably be first over Doyle, but it's my joke favorite of Doyle. But yeah, the dad's a great character.
Yeah, so. And but I still love the scene because Monty's leaving, and it's like he wants to spend Monty with his, Monty's last day of freedom with Monty. Right. And he has got to let him go.
And Naturel wants there's the scene earlier in the apartment where she's like, you spend the rest of tonight with me. He's like, I got to go see my dad.
Yeah.
And so they're all pulling at him. So,
and I think he's pulling away from his dad for slightly different reasons, which is that he really feels bad about what he's done. This I don't know if this is in the movie, but it's definitely in the book. Monty is free before going to prison because his dad has mortgaged the bar.
Oh, okay.
His dad had two things. He had the bar, which is not exactly a booming success.
No, yeah.
And he has his son, and he basically has to risk one so that his son could have a few more weeks of freedom. And it's such an understandable character choice.
Yeah, for sure.
It's the kind of thing that is subtle, and yet it is another demonstration of this love that Brian Cox conveys in his performance so effortlessly.
Yeah.
And it's just so well done. So, but then you have what is probably the second most famous scene. It's the one scene that could not possibly be in the novel. There's a scene in the novel where Jacob goes to Frank's apartment, and you get a sense as to who Frank is as a character. But what Spike Lee did,
yes,
is that he does a similar scene, but the location.
Yeah, it's all the location of that scene, and it plays out for so long. Like,
yes.
You want me to
go
cover
ahead,
it?
Please do.
Yeah, how do I tell this without giving it away too early? So he comes into the room, and there's just two shots in this scene. There's the shot towards the door, and it's giving me chills right now. Just and not just in a filmmaking way. You'll see what's coming up. So he comes in the door, they're talking like that, and as they walk past the camera this way, it flips, it's close up on them, so we don't see, it's blurred out in the background. That's how depth of field works. And then as they go towards the window, it racks focus to what's outside the window, and it is ground zero.
Yes.
And
apparently shooting that, they did not have all the necessary permissions, shall we say.
Oh yeah, I bet. There's no way they could. Yeah.
And it gets to, I think, what made the idea of the film controversial, which was the concern that the way that 9/11 was being incorporated was exploitative. And yet nowadays, people regard that as perhaps the best and most respectful movie about 9/11.
Yeah, this is a ballsy move.
It is.
It's showing close-ups of like the wreckage of they're cleaning it up, and it's mostly cleaned up, but like you see the broken stuff and the wheelbarrow and I don't know, just things down. Things down there, and you're taken back there.
Yeah, and it's integrated so perfectly into the story.
Right.
I mean, again, this is something where that Lee took a scene and he periodized it in a way he didn't have to, and yet he does it, and it works. It's like, why wouldn't that scene be in there?
There's a whole nother subtext to that scene happening, and you're going to have to point it out to me of how you connect this, because I did not see the purpose of having 9/11 in here, but just playing that out, it's a very long conversation in front of there, and there's a line in there. I'm going to look at it. Where he's like, Bin Laden could drop another bomb here, and I wouldn't moving. And it's like, wow, that is a slimy character.
But it's also it captures that grit and determination you saw after 9/11, where we were not going to let something like this stop us.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so you're seeing the sense on one hand that Frank is kind of doing this performative tough guy thing. Okay, but at the same time, it was not unusual after 9/11. You heard a lot of that we're not going to let this scare us.
Okay. Yeah. I took it completely the opposite way. I'm like, that's messed up, but yeah.
No, I think both readings are valid, because Frank is not exactly,
he's a slimy character.
He's a slimy character. So, but you also have, that's where you also get, a dialogue which is in the book, which is where Frank outlines the three choices that Monty has, where he can, and how each one of them he's paying a price. He either goes to prison, he unalives himself, or he runs.
Right.
And regardless of which choice, his life as he has known it is over, and there's no going back. And that gets to.
And that's great stakes, by the way.
It is.
There is no way out of this situation. It's got this depressing, dour tone to it that even just for that, like, I'd recommend staying against this movie if you're in a bad mood.
It's definitely not a mood not a movie you want to watch if you want to cheer up. That's for sure. Yeah. But it also, I think, gets the sense of how Monty is approaching, a turning point.
Right.
And with shooting it, overlooking ground zero, it gets the sense of how 9/11 was that for the country.
Yeah.
9/11 is a turning point.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We don't know what the future holds, but we know it is no longer like what it was before this.
Yeah. Okay. I'm starting to see your point.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
That's cool.
And he doesn't make that point explicit in terms of the dialogue, but he does kind of hammer it home a bit, where after that point, the scene ends by doing, shots of the cleanup exclusively.
Right.
That the crew's working. So.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to, because they do play it out in just that one, and it's not until the conversation's done that they start showing close-ups of them. Yeah. And
then you get a flashback of Monty being interrogated by the DEA, and this, I think, it emphasizes two things. One, it emphasizes the fact that Monty doesn't talk. Is that Monty could have flipped and provide his supplier, but he makes it a point not to. But you also have, this is where the doubts are sown about Nat and the fact that Naturel was the one who outed him. And so, and while he doesn't, say, oh, did she? He denies it, but you could tell he's not entirely sure. And then you get to, you have the scene of Frank and Jacob having dinner, and they're talking about, their respective appeals as men. And then you have another flashback scene, which is Monty's first meeting with Naturel, where
these flashback scenes disoriented me.
They are.
I don't know. They're great for what they were trying to do, but there may have been a better way to do that didn't pull you out of the story. But yeah.
They do that, and Edwards does the same thing in The Creator. There's
that's true.
So much flashback.
I feel like he does it smoother, but yeah, because you're in a flashback is the biggest thing. These ones you kind of start out the scene and thinking it's normal time, and then halfway through you're like, wait, what? And your gear shifts, and you got to like rethink the rest of the scene. That's the key for me.
There's something though but there's subtle things that he does in that flashback that I think are great, and this is. I'm now going to reference that earlier scene where when Monty is watching Naturel on the swing with her friend, and he's approached by a buyer who's wearing a suit. That's the guy who's the junkie at the beginning.
Oh, that makes sense.
And you go from seeing him as
the change, the
Wall Street guy, he's wearing a suit, to at the beginning when you see him at the beginning of the movie when it's in the present, he is
on edge.
He is in bad shape. He is so hooked. You get the impression his life has really taken a turn for the worse because of the drugs.
Yeah,
and it's a neat little thing because it underscores another point that Frank makes in his conversation with Jacob, which is that, he feels for Monty. I mean, Monty is his friend. He loves Monty, but at the same time, he's like, Monty was not a good guy. He was a drug dealer.
No, yeah.
And so you have Jacob who's he's doing this very,
Is this during the Ground Zero scene?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad you did that jump back because I have another point for this scene.
Go ahead.
I thought they were going full suspense for this, and I'm like, "Oh, this is going to be so great."
Yeah.
They didn't take that route. You take the audience in private with these guys, and you tell them this big juicy secret of these guys are the ones who turned him in. It's like, okay, now you put them in a scene like the bar scene that happens later, and it's all about, is he going to find out? But I don't know. Spike Lee's not a suspense director, but wherever you can put suspense, it always just ups the stakes.
I must confess, I did not really pick up on that, in part because I had already read the novel, and so I didn't even think to look for it. But you're right. There is a bit more of a sense there that maybe it was Frank, given the fact that he is.
Wait, I thought that was the point of that scene. I thought Frank and him had turned him in.
Well, it's not really. I think Lee makes it that potentially, but really, it's
in the movie. Is that how it's set up? Because that's what I got
in
from
the novel.
No, in the movie, is that how it is? Because that's how I read it for the whole time. Of they were the ones that turned him in.
No, it was if building upon the novel, I think it was more about their outlining their views of Monty, because it's the first scene.
Okay, well, I completely misread that, because I'd have to rewatch it. Except I'm not going to rewatch it. But yeah,
but you make an excellent point, which is I think you could read it as potentially that.
If it were that, it would make great suspense. And there was one part of a scene where I thought it was great suspense, but it was doing something else. But okay.
But you get Jacob being this going back to what the point I was making is Jacob's this naive middle class guy, and he's kind of like, wouldn't it be great if Monty could take Doyle to prison with him? And that's when Frank is like, basically, you idiot, that's not how it works in the real world. Yeah,
that's not how prison works.
It kind of underscores the sense of how the closet is not quite the word, but how closed off, and how sheltered. Jacob is
sheltered.
Yeah. So, but you have, you then get to, you get to, they're now transitioning to meeting up. Jacob, is talking with Frank, and he's talking about this hypothetical situation, which Frank instantly sees through, because again, Frank is much more streetwise. He was also a scholarship student at the private school, and that's where he and Monty have that connection. And then Nat gets there, and Monty arrives, and they go to Nikolai's club.
Right.
And
this might be the midpoint where they go into the club, because it takes it's kind of a radical different direction from the rest of the movie.
They're very much entering a different world.
Yeah.
And it is Monty's world, and because Nikolai is his supplier.
Right.
Nikolai was his boss, and Nikolai was the person that Monty refused to rat on. The thing is, I think that the DEA knows that. They just needed Monty's evidence to make their case.
Yeah.
But it's also the fact, and this is something that is played up a little bit in the movie. It's a bit more explicit in the novel, which is that while Monty has not flipped, they're never entirely. It's a question that you sometimes see, played a bit more explicitly. But how do you guarantee that he doesn't flip? Well, maybe it killed the guy, and that's something that does come up a little bit later in the movie. But so you have the scene so you have this extended sequence in the bar, and you find out Monty's sort of doing his final dispositions. He says to Jacob, "You're going to get the dog." He then expresses his regrets and his fears to Frank.
Their friendship seems much more real than it did to me when I was watching it now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Although there is a sense, it is that sense of how they're at this point where all their lives are drifting apart, and I think back to that sequence with Frank and Jacob, you get the sense that Monty was the glue that bound them together.
Yeah.
And with Monty gone, they are just going to go separate ways.
Right.
So, but you then have this Monty and Kostya, who goes to, who's at the bar, go to see Nikolai. And one of the things I love about this whole sequence in the bar, it's about choices.
Right.
These people are all making these choices. And for example, you have this this scene between Naturel and Frank, in which they share their concerns about Monty. And then Frank picks a fight with Naturel. And he calls out, she's Puerto Rican. He makes an insult about that. She slaps him. It's more explicit in the novel, but Frank, it's alluded to in the movie. Frank is attracted to Naturel.
Yeah.
And he is consciously holding back on that because of Monty. And he is making a choice to burn his bridge with Naturel, because otherwise he doesn't know if he's going to have the will,
strength to stay back.
Yeah. And you have, Jacob is making a bad choice that he instantly regrets, and Monty is given an opportunity to make a choice. And it comes from that meeting with Nikolai. there's that, Nikolai has this great story about when he went to prison and everything, and how he's been to prison 3 times, and what he's learned is that you don't want to be in prison.
Right.
And and it's implying that the way he's going to avoid going back to prison is by killing Monty. And Monty is trying to affirm his loyalty, that he won't flip. And then it turns out it's not about Monty. It's about Kostya. Kostya was the guy who flipped on Monty.
Yeah.
And this is where I think the movie is an improvement upon the book, because in the book, it's tipped off earlier that it's Kostya. That
Which one is Kostya again?
He's the big Ukrainian guy who basically.
Oh, right.
Yeah, he was with Monty in
okay.
the car at the beginning.
Yeah.
He basically was the muscle. Monty had a gun.
I must have been zoned out during this part because I did not pick up on. It's probably because I assumed earlier that Frank and
Jacob.
Jacob.
Yeah.
That they'd flipped on him, but yeah.
Yeah, it was Kostya, and this was not made as clear in the movie, but Kostya was on his 3rd strike. Mm-hmm. And he said in the novel earlier that he's never going to go back to prison. So, and whereas Lee, made it a point to make it a bit more, obscure, until you get to the moment where it turns out Nikolai has figured out that it's Kostya.
Yeah.
And he gives Monty a chance to kill Kostya.
Yeah.
And it's something, and this is one of the things I love about it, is that they don't make this point.
That scene makes much more sense now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you also have to think about what Monty does if he kills Kostya, which he kind of wants to do.
Yeah.
Which is that if he kills Kostya, Nikolai owns him. Because then
true.
he's got Monty, he has,
blackmail on him. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's leverage that will guarantee that Monty's in his life. And Monty instead makes the choice that he regrets not having made sooner, which is he walks away. He basically says, I'm not going to do it. I'm done with you. I'm going to, keep my trap shut for the next 7 years. But when I'm out, I'm literally out. And
I like that much more now.
Yeah.
I completely misread that scene. But okay, let me jump back real quick to the beginning of walking in the bar. Uh-huh. He doesn't walk into the bar. He floats. I don't know if you noticed that.
I did not.
His head does not bob up and down. It just goes straight. And you know how they did that?
How?
You just put them on a dolly in front of the camera that is also on a dolly. And
you pulled them?
You probably push it from behind because that's usually how it goes. And if you pull it, you'd see the guy, but it's usually pushed.
Oh. And
there's a couple other shots in there where they do it with 2 characters that are much more, what is the word? Much more noticeable.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's some great filmmaking in the entire bar scene.
Oh, it's so great! Like this entire movie. Oh, I have not been covering. They keep doing double shots in this. That sounds like drinking, which I know nothing about. Well, yes. By the way, I know nothing about drinking. They cover. Okay, the first time they do it is when the dog starts to attack him, he backs up twice. I don't know if you noticed that.
I did not.
It's unless you're an editor, because you're used to seeing those kind of mistakes, because usually that's a mistake. Mm-hmm. But it's a style thing because they do it several times, 3 times, and it's style because that's a pattern. Mm-hmm. But they also do it on in a scene with Natural where they hug, and then there's one that'll save till the end that they do it 3 times. Mm-hmm. And the hug where they, is it Charles? No, Jacob.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jacob is hugging him. They do that double shot again. And I'll tell you what the 3 time is at the end. And I'm sure it's a very emotional part. And I'm sure that's why they did it 3 times. Mm-hmm. I, however, didn't really like the style, at least at first. By the end, I think it kind of won me over. Mm. And I wonder why it's probably highlighting those specific moments is why they used it, but I'm not sure. I'd have to ask Spike Lee.
So, but now that Monty knows it's Kostya,
Yeah.
He goes home. He apologizes to Naturel. And I think for him, it's something that he can hold on to. She's having to move back in with her mother from their apartment. But Monty knows that, at least, this woman whom he loves, and he makes it clear that he loves her.
Yeah.
He has an opportunity. Kostya tries to set him up with a prostitute, one final fling, and Monty's like, no, I won't do it. He says to Frank, Naturel is the only one I continue to, desire. And so it's in a sense, it gives him something else to fall back on in this experience, but he is terrified.
Absolutely. It's like he's being swallowed up by this monster, which he definitely is. And I didn't think I was going to cover this. So I've never been to prison, but I do have a sense of what that's like. And I have a hard time watching prison movies sometimes. Ironically, I watched Escape from Alcatraz the other time. I had no problems with it then. I've been in mental hospitals for a couple times. And it's kind of the same situation, just that locked door. You may not be a prisoner or have done something, but you're behind a door and you can't get out. And I have dreams sometimes of just inescapable dreams where it's just mazes where you can't get out. And it's psychologically, I'm sure prisoners have that same thing.
To me, it's the most relatable thing about Monty, which is the fact that he is facing this life as, in prison, which, for all of his association with the criminal world terrifies him.
Yeah.
So he goes on this walk with Jacob and Frank, and he asks Frank, who's the only one of the two he can ask, to beat him up.
Rough him up. Before we get to that, though, there is this amazing wide shot, and it's usually a mistake to play stuff in the wide. There's this massive wide where it's just so far away from them of them walking on the dock.
Yeah.
And so they go up to this, and it's probably because they're framed where they're separated enough you can see them and you can see their motions of, I think at one point one of them checks their watch and you see that movement of the elbow. Yeah. And there's a tugboat coming in and they're like, wouldn't that be great to be a tugboat captain just going out on the ocean? And I just realized the subtext of that right now of he's just wanting his freedom and it's going to be taken away from him in several hours. And it's like that last, flirtatious thought of just running for it. Right.
But then he makes a decision which underscores his commitment, which is that he, asks Frank to beat him up so he's not as pretty. Yeah. And so that he won't, be assaulted, as soon as he gets to prison. And that's where it's such a great scene because you get the friendship between these three men where Jacob is trying to,
I read that scene very differently now. That is kind of a touching scene.
Yeah. And Frank just can't bring himself to do it. And
I had the subtext of these are the guys that turned him in and why are they staying with him this whole time was the question in my mind. Yeah. And to make this a great suspense movie, they could have had that where, and I'm not saying change it, but this is a great, just little mind sandbox of you could have it be the suspense of you set up in the ground zero scene that these guys are the ones who turned him in. The reason that they're not just running for the hills or leaving him is because they don't want them to suspect them. Yeah. And so they have to stay with them the whole time. And the one part that I thought they were doing suspense is when he wanted Jacob to toast him and he couldn't say a good thing about him. Oh. And that's called a close call of if it were suspense that he had turned him in, that could give him away. So you want to do close calls with suspense.
It is fascinating to consider how you could easily make that the plot.
Yeah.
And you would need to make so few changes.
It's true, because that's the way I read it. The only thing that seemed off about me, there's a lot of things off about me. The only thing that seemed off to me was just, why are they sticking with him?
Yeah.
But I came up with that idea right now that you can easily make it work. But
yeah. But you had that fight scene, and so you have Monty provoking Frank into hitting him, and Frank beats him up, and it's done entirely in silence.
Yeah.
And so you have Doyle, who is tied to
barking is
a bench,
this is a great way to, like, if things get so loud in a movie, they do this often for if a bomb goes off near you, but also if it gets really loud, a great way is just to cut out the sound, and it's like, it's loud because it's so loud there's no sound,
and you don't need sound because the emotions are so conveyed with the dog's anxiety and Jacob's reaction,
and it's the strength of visuals too. But,
and Frank is hitting him. You're seeing the blood, but you're also seeing Frank sobbing. It's just such a wonderfully done scene, and it's the idea that Frank is literally beating up his friend, blooding his friend, and it ultimately is an act of love. Yeah.
Okay, I read that scene much differently now. I don't know what I was very confused during that scene. That's what I'll say about that.
And then when Monty gets back, he says he was just set upon by some guys Natural cleans him up, and and Monty's dad shows up, and he's going to drive Monty to prison. And so you get first that scene of Monty seeing the faces of all these New Yorkers, from
which ties back to the mirror scene.
And then you get this extended fantasy sequence as they're driving, and
which angers me that it's a fantasy sequence, but
well, it is actually true to the novel. Not in quite the involved way that Lee does it, but it does get to the sense. I actually love it, what it represents, which is the sense of what Monty is losing,
right?
And it is the fact that all that promise, all that possibility is gone,
right?
And while this whole thing plays out as to what he might do, and of course his dad is talking about how, it's how it's going to turn out in a way that where,
it's coming from his dad, this sequence,
and that's why I think one of the things that makes it effective, which is that it is that sense of a father, which is that is the last thing he can think of to protect his son is, and it's almost, and it is, I think, great that it's his fantasy ultimately more than Monty's,
right?
His fantasy that maybe if they do this radical thing that will cost him everything, the bar, everything, that they can somehow get away and Monty can be protected. And then you cut back to the car still proceeding to Otisville.
Yeah, my headcanon, that shot doesn't exist. But okay, so he goes out to middle of nowhere in the West.
Yeah.
Which is, to New Yorkers, that's middle of nowhere. There's not a building in sight.
Yes.
And then there's a Greyhound bus that pulls up as his dad is making this narration. And it's a great use of narration, by the way. Sometimes it's used as a crutch, but this, I think, plays it very well. And the bus pulls away, and there's Naturel. And then she goes in to hug her. Repeats it 3 times. The hug, and I really liked it right there.
Yeah,
and you wouldn't have that without the buildup of it would just seem like a mistake had you not had the double ones from before. But and
it's great that it's part of the fantasy sequence, so it kind of adds to the fantastic element of it.
Yeah,
so, it's interesting. It's one of the subtle differences, which is that when the fantasy sequences in the novel, Naturel does not join him. His dad speculates that he would encounter someone else because he can have no further contact.
Yeah.
But his father in the movie is trying to make it more enticing by implying that it would be a risk, but we would do it. And maybe you could still have some semblance of that life you're leaving behind.
Yeah. But
at the end, Monty's going off to not to freedom, but to imprisonment.
Yeah. And when I think about that now, like, it's the more emotionally satisfying one is the fantasy, but it's kind of justice served of he needs to go to jail because I guess I'm wrong about this statement, but I thought that he didn't feel any remorse for what he'd done, because the only comment that I remember is that I should have gotten out earlier, and it's like, okay, that's your only regret. But That is pretty good, though.
Yeah. In a sense, it is not anything he says that demonstrates his remorse. It is the fact that of the three choices, he chooses the one where he will accept the punishment.
Right.
And he makes it a point not to take any of the outs, either the out that his father's providing or the out that the DEA provided.
Right.
He accepts his punishment. Yeah. And that's the movie.
Yeah. Pretty good movie. For the sake of Criss Cross, we won't be covering movies like this again, but it's very great storytelling.
It is.
I was about to go into the star ratings right now, but yeah, we'll wait on that. Okay. That is our review for 25th Hour. Now our review of The Creator.
So what was your experience with this movie?
Well, I'd seen it in the theater with a friend. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to give you my honest take right from the beginning, but this rewatching completely redid it, and I'm sure your viewing of it will change it too. I thought it was kind of overloaded with tropes to the point where it was just, the story was mediocre. The visuals are astounding, which I feel, this is going to be my commentary on Gareth Edwards, then I'm going to shut up. He makes incredible visuals. Look no further than the 2014 Godzilla. The sense of scale with Godzilla, and every single shot, he makes sure to show the humans on the ground and then pan up to Godzilla, and you're like, he is so massive. And there's that great shot of, this is way off track, but the tsunami coming in, and it goes along with the water, and it's got that music that plays really well. Pans up the building. You see those men on top of the building, gives you a sense of scale. They shoot the flares, directs your eyes, and also lights up Godzilla. And I'm like, oh my goodness. When I watch that, and you just see a piece of his arm, basically. You don't even see all of Godzilla. And just, I keep overusing this phrase, but for this chef's kiss, like that shot is just, and everything he does with Godzilla in that movie is just amazing. Again, story not so great, but yeah.
I think that's something that I sometimes like to do with, when I see films, is to guess the director's background in film, and there's certain directors.
I can spoil it for you.
I know what the background is for Edwards,
okay.
But I mean, there are certain directors who you can tell by virtue of their style that they started out as editors,
right?
Or you can tell when the director was an actor or is an actor because they focus
like Mel Gibson would be
or Robert Redford,
right.
Or Kenneth Costner.
Right.
They're very actory centered movies.
Right.
And Gareth Edwards, he started out in VFX.
That's right. Yeah.
And I'm
going to cover that in depth right here. There's some fun stuff with that, but yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I like his films, because I am really drawn to this. Another of my favorite filmmakers is Stanley Kubrick.
Right.
And he started out as a photographer. He started out in that
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So, and the visuals he's such great visual composition. You go back to his first movie, Monsters. You look at Rogue One. I mean, that whole scene on Scarif, where you have
right, yeah. I mean, just the fact of making it a tropical planet, which we've never seen stormtroopers on before, and you see them walking in the water, you're like, that is a striking image.
Exactly,
just like the turquoise behind them, and I don't know.
Yeah, it's like, the Imperial Army invading Fiji or something like that.
Yeah.
And Godzilla is another great one, because the fascinating thing is, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Godzilla, and you watch there were literally 24 Godzilla movies that preceded that one, and somehow Gareth Edwards was the first one to do that with scale.
Yeah, he's got a great sense of scale and composition. I don't want to say this with him because he's good at what he does, but I'll use another director for an example for this. Sometimes you think they'd be better in another role, like Tim Burton would make a great art designer, because his stories are kind of lacking, at least nowadays. I mean, his original ideas are great. Yeah. I mean, that comes from himself, and that's why it's great. But also Michael Bay would make a great stunt designer.
Yeah,
that's about all I'll say about that. But yeah.
No, I know exactly what you mean. And
Yeah.
and it is, and the visuals. And one of the things I really enjoy about this film is not just that it is visually amazing, but that the visuals make certain specific points that I think really inform the movie. Now I'll get to that in a little bit.
Okay. Yeah.
Like you, I had seen in the theater, and I had taken my son, and I tended to sometimes walk out of movies and be overly impressed with them. And okay, this is confession time. And
Rogue One was like that for me. So yeah.
well, Rogue One is one that my appreciation of which has actually grown over time. But I'm going to be, okay, you're going to think a lot less of me.
That's okay.
When I first saw the 1998 Godzilla, I thought it was a good film.
Yeah.
And
same
now,
for me. I was a kid. I was,
I wasn't a kid. I was an adult. And
I was 8 years old. So
yeah, I guess I saw it through the eyes of an 8-year-old. It was especially since it was
it's probably the 8-year-old that saw the first Godzilla movie that you're like, it's finally in America.
Yeah. And now I'm kind of realizing just how awful it was. But I walked out of that movie and I was like, this is, I recognized it was flawed. I think of Gareth Edwards' 4 movies, it is the least of them. But at the same time, I do think that I was really blown away by it. And then I rewatched it and I started to see the seams. And I imagine that's something we'll go into very shortly.
Oh, yeah, let's go ahead.
Okay. It begins with, you get this brief definition of Nirmata, which is helpful because you're going to hear this word a lot in the movie. Yeah. But then you have these opening credits. And the opening credits, they reminded me of something else I loved about Godzilla, which is how he can take this, kind of do this period footage.
Yeah.
And it was
fun.
It was sequence, so fun. Yeah. And I'm watching it and you can't tell easily the stuff that he did, which was, he created or integrated versus one just using pure clips. I mean, it gets obvious as he goes on, you start to see more of the robots.
I think it's a mixture of both.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, he is visual effects background, so he can easily do that.
And he has this gift, I think, for using credits to do the backstory.
Right.
Because you get, in those opening credits, you get basically like nearly a century of history.
That's true. And it's kind of an alternate history where in the 50s they started making AIs as robots. And it's kind of weird that they say AIs and they mean robots the whole time, but because we're dealing with AI right now and it's disembodied at this point, but that is probably the way it's headed.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I do think this is a film that is going to endure, because it is on one level about this engagement of how do we, interact with this creation of ours.
Right.
So, but then you see how it culminates in this nuclear explosion. Los Angeles has been destroyed.
Yeah. And
how this has sparked a now 15-year, or actually with the opening movie, 10-year war against AI.
Right.
And that it's being waged in South Asia, and it's called New Asia. And there's this great, the climactic clip is this general is speaking to Congress, and he's talking about how we're at war not with the New Asians, but with AI. So we're not hating on those people with just these machines in their midst.
Right.
Even though the war itself becomes indistinguishable.
Yeah.
So then you cut to Kodang in New Asia in 2065, and you get the first sense of gorgeous visuals. There's this beautiful beach scene. It's the kind of thing you might see at the opening of a commercial for sandals or something, but much nicer than that. And then these men emerge.
The lights from Nomad turn on, and this beam of blue light just lighting up and the greatest thing is just the reflection in the ocean. And I have no idea how they did the VFX for this.
Yeah. And he did the VFX on a relatively smaller, limited budget. I mean, compared to
very small.
You take like Marvel movies where they spend 2.5 times the budget on making it, and their VFX are so inferior to what you see in this movie.
Yeah, it's because he's a VFX guy. I was going to cover this later, but this is a great segue. His first film that he did all the VFX himself. Mm-hmm. He had a spreadsheet that he put down each shot and an estimate of how long it was going to take. And he went through shot by shot and did every single one. And it had like army scenes, I think. I don't know what the movie was, but
Monsters. It was set in Mexico.
No, it wasn't Monsters.
Oh,
it
was
was
Monsters?
He was talking about I think it was like a History Channel type thing where he had to recreate armies and stuff. Oh. So I guess it wasn't his film, but he was working on something where he was doing all the VFX. And I've been in that same boat I come from VFX also. But actually, when I saw Star Wars, the first thing I wanted to do was make spaceships, and that's what I wanted to do my whole life. Since then, I've found story, and story is really my muse, I suppose. Plug for Facets of Story right now, right here. Blatant plug. Anyway, for my first movie, Surviving the Zombie Plague, I made it during film school. Mm-hmm. You guys can go watch it. It's a fun movie, and there is a lot of VFX for obvious reasons because we've got zombie hordes, and I didn't finish the VFX. He did. Like that takes some kind of discipline to be able to do that. And that's why I don't want to be a VFX artist, but I applaud others who do because it's a very underappreciated art. But.
And he is, I think I share a lot of your qualms about the story. Yeah. But the VFX is so on point and
they're
so
amazing.
Well done.
They're seamless. Like if they weren't of lasers and flying space stations, you'd assume there's no VFX.
Yeah, exactly. And then you get cut to this couple, Joshua Taylor and Maya Fey, who are in bed. They're enjoying an intimate moment, and then there's this interruption, and these robots and simulants storm in, and they've got this soldier that they've captured. And so it's clear that they're about to be attacked. Right. And they're like, we got to get out of here. And they go away. And then you find out Joshua Taylor's a soldier. He is undercover. And he is looking for this, Nirmata figure. Mm-hmm. And he's convinced he's so close. And these guys are blowing his cover. And as he's explaining this to this wounded soldier that he has supposedly shot, Maya overhears him, and she is just and Gemma Chan, she just plays that role that scene so well.
I mean, she has such limited screen time that she's got to sell this thing on. We've got to connect to this character. In the theater, I'm going to be honest, I did not connect with her, and the flashbacks didn't help. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do nerdy editing / storytelling bit real quick. But it's more effective if you can put more upfront about the character and then you're emotionally connected to them. There's a Finding Nemo bit that I'm not going to do here because I've done it several times on Facets of Story. Go check that out. On Act 1. I have no idea when the release is going to line up, but once it's out, go check it out.
But yeah, she just she does a great job of seeing with her face and her tone, the mix of outrage and betrayal and the heartbreak.
Right.
And so she and the robots are fleeing by boat, and Nomad just comes down, with a missile, boom, and kills them all. And
that's so effective.
She makes Edward's choice work, right. Whereas and frankly, not every actor could.
That's true.
So then you cut to 5 years later, and Taylor's back in the United States, and here is where you see a lot of the real establishment of the war.
Right.
Which is you learn that Taylor lost his family in the Los Angeles attack. That's where he also lost an arm and a leg, literally.
Yeah.
And that he is now working, cleaning up the Los Angeles bomb site, Ground Zero.
Yeah.
And he's there with another worker, and you're hearing the sort of conversation that is such an American conversation, which is that his coworkers sharing the gossip, the rumors of why the attack happened. And it's a really interesting scene because it's a horrifying scene.
Yeah.
And yet they're just so jaded about it.
Yeah, just nonchalant.
Yeah, and it's followed by another horrifying scene, which is when after they're cleaning up the site, they take all these robots and there's this gigantic compactor.
Yeah, just smashing them.
Yeah.
There's one single robot in the middle of them that's just
trying to claw its way out.
Yeah, and he gets smashed in there. That's how you do storytelling.
Yeah.
You cannot connect to a million different robots, but you put one little robot in the middle that's squirming with his arms like that. And I have to look at it to see how they direct your eye to him, because that is a task. Like, they probably have every other robot turned in some other way where you can't see their face and their arms. Is probably be my assumption, but it's great storytelling.
And yet to tailor their human-like reactions is just programming.
Yeah.
So
they're not real, is what he keeps saying.
Exactly. He for him is just which
for reality I kind of agree with, but yeah.
But it's also interesting because you would think that he would empathize because he is himself part machine.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the purpose of him having robotic limbs was, because they don't really do anything with that in the film.
They don't, but I think it is. I mean, it's one of those things where I read into the story, and this is one of the reasons why I think I enjoyed it as much as I did, because I wanted to piece parts of it together. Yeah. I could see how it helped him connect with Maya, and you get that flashback scene after the robots get crushed, where you have him interacting with Maya. And this gets to the same problem that you identified with 25th Hour, which is that you don't recognize at first when the flashbacks are flashbacks. Because when I first saw it, I thought he was speaking with like a therapist or something. And it's difficult to understand that it's Maya because the hair is different and the tone is different. Again, great acting on both parts, both Gemma Chan and John David Washington, where it's not quite a meet cute, but it's kind of they're getting to know each other. So she's asking him. That's where you actually get the background as to his family's loss. But I think that was key to how he was inserted into her life, because she was identified as the daughter of Nirmata.
Right.
And the idea was that he went in undercover to have her lead him to Nirmata, so the United States military could do what they do best, which is send a missile down and take out the site. Yeah. So then he's doing therapy in the pool, and he's met by this general and this colonel, and the colonel's played by Allison Janney. And there are not really a lot of big name actors in it, but Janney is just so good in this as this no nonsense colonel type.
Yeah, I think she's probably the best acting of it. I mean, the U.S. soldier ones don't get a lot to play with, especially the general. He's a bad guy from the beginning. Yeah. But she does a great job of writing the line and making it look justified that they are the way they are. Yeah.
She explains it in two ways. The first one, and this one is like the general attitude you're seeing, which is that this is an evolutionary thing. She has that it's a small speech about how Neanderthals were actually pretty advanced, but they got beaten up by somebody nastier and taken out by someone nastier, and that's how we're viewing this threat from AI. We're not fighting machines, we're fighting this evolutionary thing.
Yeah.
And they point to Los Angeles as this. But they think they found Nirmata. They hear about this weapon that is being built called Alpha 1, which is going to take out Nomad, and it happens to be at the lab which Taylor knows, and they need him in, and he doesn't care, but then they show him video suggesting Maya's still alive.
Yeah.
And that's what he's about. He's about not
getting her. He doesn't care about the rest of
it. And so you get this, flying to New Asia, and you get a bit more about Howell's personal motivations, about how this isn't just about the evolutionary thing. She's also lost her 2 sons in this war. So for her, it's about, defeating this enemy.
Yeah.
So, and that there's a personal element to it. And so then they're dropped at the site, and you get a sense as to just how jaded for when you contrast it with the speech at the beginning. We're not fighting New Asia. We're fighting the AI, and these soldiers, these Americans, are there, and they're just you have one guy, McBride, who he's
the bearded guy.
Yeah, the bearded guy. He's literally threatening to kill a dog.
Blatantly. Okay, this is where I'm going to start to cover this. This is the emotional manipulation that is done so well in 25th Hour, which is kind of a bad thing in my opinion. Of you're pulled into this thing. It's the kind of thing that you can use for like the Joker, and you can pull somebody down a rabbit hole that they don't want to be in. But for this one, it's just so blatant of, oh, I'm pointing a gun at a dog. And I mean, they use the dog in the other movie to great effect. But in this one, it's like, okay, pointing a gun at a puppy, that is just the most cartoon bad guy thing you can do.
It is. And that's where you get to the, it's just not subtle.
Yeah.
And of course, then they hammer the point home when they discover the entrance, and the bulk of the team goes down to the lab, and you have the farmer screaming at McBride about how those things down there, they have bigger hearts.
Right.
It's actually something I can appreciate in terms of the message that Edwards is trying to make, which we'll get to when we do the Criss Cross, but it's not subtle.
No, it's not at all.
Yeah.
She's basically delivering exposition there.
Yeah.
But, okay, let me get this gripe out of the way to begin with of, I do not care about AI. Like, I know it's the big thing nowadays, but I don't think it will ever replace humans. We're so multifaceted and have something that robots can never have. Whether if you believe in this or not, a soul or a human mind or whatever you want to call it. And they may get close, but I don't know. It's my personal belief that they won't ever replace us. But they could, I don't know. I'm starting to see a possibility where they could get very close.
Yes.
But yeah.
And that's one of the assumptions you see in the movie, which is that the robots are physically different, even the simulants, the ones that look like humans, but nonetheless they live robot lives. There's a scene later on where the robots are relaxing and they're watching. You have one robot that's watching a video of a robot dancing. Yeah. You have another robot that's smoking.
Yeah, that's true. And there's a robot storyteller, a robot dad, which we're going to get to. That scene just ripped me to shreds. I had a trouble connecting with the robots in this movie because I saw what they were trying to do. But anyway, I don't want to.
It's not subtle, but then again, I wonder if Garth Edwards was a little worried that they weren't going to get the point. So
yeah.
But you do have. But at the same time, though, the shootout scene in the lab. There's this one thing that there's this one scene in it that I really like, which is where there's this lab and you have these workers and you're in the security office overlooking the lab, and these guys are just sitting around watching a TV show, and then you see in the lab the soldiers coming in, they're starting to shoot at the lab guys, and then the guards react, and as the guards are reacting, the camera moves into the video footage. So you start watching the video footage. You actually see the guards getting shot and killed by the soldiers. You're seeing the video footage of it from the camera that's in the security office. And it's just stuff like that. It was just, I enjoyed that.
And there's the great joke in there where the robot is translating what the lady's saying as she's screaming, and she's the Asian lady that's in there, and she's like, the robot translates, what is it?
Make love to yourself, make love to your mother.
Make love to yourself, make love to your mother.
Yeah.
That's it,
It was, and that's another element of this movie I really did enjoy, which is that there's a conceptualization of futurist technology that, to me, it works.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you see how filmmakers sometimes, when they make sci-fi films and they envision technology, it doesn't seem realistic in the sense that, in terms of how we use technology today. It's like these Americans are constantly walking around with these translators. Yeah. And that, which to me, I'm like, that is one, technology I could see not too far down the road. Two, exactly how Americans would use it. They wouldn't bother to learn the language. They just carry these translators to translate it for them. And, but the soldiers are basically, they're being very aggressive. They're shooting guards. There's one gruesome scene which Edwards doesn't show, but he shows the guy's about to take off the face of one of the corpses so they can use the face ID to
scan it. Yeah.
But of course then and this thing I find fascinating about is that the soldiers end up fighting cops.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, because I mean, you think that there'd be a new Asian army. You never see a new Asian army, but they're constantly fighting police forces.
Right.
Which speaks to, I don't know, some sort of like maybe the difference between a world with AI and a world where humans have to be in charge, and how but it's so the police are showing up and the fire. It's basically the situation's beginning to spiral out of control.
Yeah.
And they're having to, and they're clearly outnumbered. And so it creates a situation where Taylor is the one who finally gets to see what this weapon is, and it's a simulant in the form of a young girl. That's what Alpha O is.
Yep.
Is a simulant.
And the way they reveal it is there's a chair in front of a TV, and I get Matrix vibes from this, but it goes in on the chair, like a point of view shot of Joshua walking around, and then he looks in the chair, and there's a little girl said, I can't remember if she peeks out or what, but like it's just a little girl sitting in the chair watching the thing. And back to what you were talking about of the making the reality of the simulants. Visually, they do that amazingly well with the ones with human faces with the little whirring gears in the back with this, like that. The thing that does it is that negative space of that hole in the gears.
Yeah.
It just makes you feel that uncanny valley in the best way possible, because you've got the reality of the human performer with just this little thing added to them.
And it's something that they call to later in the movie, where they when he's trying to hide Alfie, he has to have her wear a hat, because otherwise she's going to be easily identifiable as a simulant.
Yeah, the disguiser. That's really clever.
And it's unique because, and this is something they note later in the movie, simulants, robots, some of them look like people. They all play these roles, but they are all envisioned as adults. Right. So the very fact that you have Alpha Zero as a little girl is...
it's a big outlier.
Yeah, it's a big outlier. And
I hadn't noticed that. That's a great setup of you show adult. Yeah. Oh, it's a child. It's contrast, and it shows you, this one is special.
And it instantly sets Taylor back. He doesn't quite know how to deal with it. He was expecting something that would be easier for him to dismiss, but he's not expecting to see a little girl.
Yeah.
But she flees the lab. Yeah. Taylor follows, and the whole attack on the lab just goes south. Yeah. The soldiers are getting shot. They're having to pull out. That one woman who is holding the perimeter, she's running. They shoot something at her. Initially, it's like, it didn't have an effect. She gets on board the plane. The plane's flying off, and it turns out there's a bomb stuck to her back. Yeah, there's a bomb on her. Yeah. That was it sounds morbid, but it was a really clever thing of those sticky bombs. Yeah. They used that several times. Yeah, and again, it gets to how well I think Edwards visualized the technology, which was, he could see all. I mean, it's not something we can do today, and it's stuff that you don't even notice because it's just part of the world. Yeah, of it. They don't sit there and say, "Go get the sticky bomb" or something like that, which they really just show it and show how it works. Yeah, and just in the same way that nowadays we use drones, and 30, 40 years ago, the idea of these small guided or unguided was sci-fi. Yeah, it was sci-fi, and now people are like, "Oh, they're drones." So just same way, now we have sticky bombs in this gigantic suborbital space station that just looms overhead like the sword of Damocles. There is a real sense of reality to that space station. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, it is, but at the same time, there's a sense of unreality. That kind of gets to a point, which is that it orbits, at one point it's like it's hovering in space, and then it's so low that it is just like over the landscape. And you get the impression that it's not, while it moves around, it doesn't necessarily go up or down, because it's like it's always conveniently where it needs to be for the shot. That's true. Yeah. It was something I didn't really pick up on the first time, but when I rewatched it, I'm like, okay, how is it low enough to where we can see that detail and yet it's supposed to be in space? This movie has a particularly wide aspect ratio, so you gotta put it really close to the horizon to be able to see it. Yes, but at the same time, it's not supposed to be there because that would make it a little bit too accessible. But but we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. So, but then you have the cut to the card saying "the child." Yeah, I like that. I like the titles. It helped orient you. So the next morning, Taylor wakes up. The strike team has been largely killed, but Nomad's taken out the lab, so he's just kind of by himself. And then he sees Alfie, and then he sees one of the survivors of the strike team, Shipley, and he's thinking, I got to get out of here. So
Right.
they hide in a hut. And this is when you begin to see another way in which Alfie is exceptional, which is that she can control technology.
Right.
And he's trying to turn off TV. She turns on, and it's interesting. If you watch the TV show, it is anime with Nomad.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And because later on she's watching something, and it's actually an old 50s movie called Prince in Space, a Japanese film. But this was, it's kind of, and I like, because it shows just how thoroughly lived in this world is, that not only do they envision this technology, that Edwards has kind of thought about how this would be reflected in the culture. So,
Right.
But you also find out that Howell survived, the Colonel.
Yeah.
And she finds out from Taylor what Alpha Zero is, and she tells him, go ahead and kill it. And it looks like he's about to do that. Then he gets interrupted by a farmer, a simulant farmer, who is almost worshiping Alfie. He's like, oh, they actually, did it. And so the encounter with the simulant farmer gets the attention of the police. And there's actually this interesting duplication of a shot from Godzilla. It's the scene when they're trying to find the second Muto in Nevada, and they go to the waste storage place, and they're in the tunnels, and one of the and the guy says, hey, and all the soldiers turn around in unison. They do the same thing, which is when Taylor shoots the simulant, all the police turn around in unison.
Oh yeah.
And they storm the hut, and you get that wonderful shootout in which Taylor is saved by, of all things, a dog.
Yeah. I was so sure that dog was going to blow up. I'm like, don't blow up the dog. It's weird. Dogs are kind of the cheat code for movies or storytelling in general.
So, but he gets away with Shipley, but he's being pursued now by Howell McBride. She gets caught, and it turns out that McBride, our least favorite member of the strike team, because again, threatens just dogs.
Blatantly bad guy.
Yeah. They managed to take over the police vehicle, and they're now in pursuit. And you get this extended sequence of Taylor beginning to bond with Alfie.
Right.
And it's fine, but it's kind of rote.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
you've seen it before in Logan, and to go back further, Paper Moon.
Yeah. I mean, it's been done so many times, and it's not poorly done here, but just kind of, I mean, on the rewatch, I'm like, let's get to the next significant development.
Yeah.
And that is, of course, we have the cut to the friend, and we then have a bit of establishment with Drew, who was the soldier that had been caught by the robots in the beach scene at the beginning.
Yeah.
We find out that he was Taylor's handler. He helped insert Taylor with Maya when Taylor was undergoing that mission. And
which, again, this is another same gripe, but it would have been nice to know that friend earlier.
Yes.
To have just seen him, we'd have more of a personal connection, at least a recognition.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
He leads too hard to flashback to make that point.
Yeah.
But what is also established, though, is that Drew has undergone this journey where you go from him being, and I'd say that it is nicely established, which is that you have him saying, don't go native to Taylor, and yet he has gone native 5 years later. He's not fighting the robots. He's apparently running a factory where they build them.
He's got a girlfriend that's a robot.
He's got a girlfriend who's a simulant, and of course I'd say he's very awkwardly used in the story. He's there to provide the info dump of that Alfie's not like other simulants. She's going to grow, which is in itself, interesting, but also that she will eventually be able to control all technology anywhere.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, this is where I started to get a little bugged, because they're making her a bit too much like this godlike character. And the issue really comes out at the end, when you see her at the very end, and we'll get to this, but her powers always seem to work until it's necessary for the story for them not to work.
Yeah. It is cool to watch her use that EMP power, though.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how she activates it too. And I didn't pick up on it until I was rewatching a bit of the scene at the farm when the strike team's storming it, and how some people were praying. She activates it by, she basically puts her hands in prayer and closes her eyes, and it's like she's meditating for a moment.
Yeah, my dad walked into the room having not seen the rest of the movie, and just like, the robot's praying. I'm like, it's doing a thing.
Yeah.
But
and of course it's another example of how of Edward saying that these robots are very much like us.
Right.
Because I mean, later on they're literally religious figures. They're monks.
yeah, I do really like that. We'll get there.
That was pretty neat. But you get this great, you get the info dump, which kind of underscores why Alfie is, the danger that she poses to Nomad. But then the robot police arrive. Taylor takes them out, and he then flees with Alfie and now Drew, who's along for one more piece of information. When they get to the beach house, which is where this tracker that Taylor thinks will lead him to Maya is located, Taylor is told by Drew that Nirmata wasn't her father, she was Nirmata. And that was why they attacked the community at the beach house 5 years previously, and yet they never bothered to tell Taylor this until now.
Right.
And so Taylor is kind of like, his world has been rocked. He's kind of feeling that it's kind of the same reaction that Maya had. Neither of them really did know each other. He never figured out she was Nirmata, and she never figured out that he was an American plant. But then, some other people show up, some other figures show up. Drew is killed, and Taylor and Alfie are captured by robots led by Harun, who was like Maya's right-hand simulant 5 years previously.
Right. Let me jump back real quick. As they're going along, there's this really touching conversation where she's like, I can't go to heaven because I'm not real, and you can't go to the heaven because you're not good. Yeah. And then this great visual storytelling of, he tells her heaven is a beautiful place in the sky, and she looks up at Nomad, and it's like that's gonna pay off later. Well, that's a setup for
That's the part of the bonding sequence that really makes it worth watching, which are the visuals, because you're not just getting that, but you're also seeing these scenes of everyday life in New Asia, which show the blending of the robots, the simulants, and the humans, and how they all somehow exist harmoniously. Yeah. Which the opening credits implied was indeed the case in the West until the bomb. Yeah. But it kind of is implying that the West spheres are overblown, but you have the bomb. That gets to what for me is my biggest grievance with the movie, but we're getting to that very shortly. So Drew is killed, and Taylor's been captured by these robots, and then you cut to, the title card saying the mother. Right. And we see Taylor's now a prisoner. The robots are taking him to some location, and Taylor has this, basically Harun now takes over the role of Drew in terms of providing exposition.
It's Ken Watanabe's character?
Yeah, Ken Watanabe's character, the simulant. He tells Taylor two things. One, he tells Taylor that it was humans that started the war because Los Angeles was destroyed not by an AI, but a human glitch. Right. And that all robots want to coexist peacefully with humans. Mm-hmm. That first point bugs me insanely, because to me, it infantilizes the movie. Because up until then, there's this very fascinating idea, which is that there was at some point an AI that was problematic, part of the defense system, and that it had tried to pull a Skynet, and that what you have now is a typical American overreaction, where they got not just the United States but the entire West banned AI. Yeah. And how now they're just basically trying to root it out in this war on AI. Now it turns out, no, apparently the whole war is just a huge cover-up for the fact that Americans screwed up, and AI is totally blameless. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, you had this nice degree of moral complexity.
Yeah, no, it's just wiped away. It's black and white. And it would be nice if they showed that if they dramatized it, it would play out much better. Like it might mull over your concern a little bit of if it's not just a line of dialogue where he says, "Oh, it was just this." It's like, how do we know that?
Yeah. And there's that question of doubt that he could be just basically, kind of, messing with Taylor, but
yeah. And it's Ken Watanabe. That's why we take him seriously. But I mean,
it's an element that if Edwards is going to insert, he really should have developed, but then he just basically drops it. And I hate it so much because it then basically makes it that it's not just humans that are the bad guys. Keep in mind,
right?
Because the new Asians, they figured it out. It's Americans,
yeah,
in particular. But then the robots, their base turns out it's under attack. Then we get a shot of Nomad off in the distance, taking out the base, and in the confusion, Alfie goes down, sees Taylor. Taylor convinces Alfie to let him out. The robots are like, where's Taylor? He's escaped. So they decide they're going to base, and it turns out Taylor hasn't really escaped. He's just hiding and being led to their base. And then and this is the part where I felt like they were, it made me hate that line of dialogue all the more, because then you find out how the robots are not morally pure, because they're having this conversation about how, okay, we've got to figure out how we're going to get Alfie up to Nomad so we can blow it up. Will she die? Probably. But you know what? That's how we're going to win the war.
Yeah.
And it just makes that line, that nugget that Edwards has inserted earlier, just so much more of an outlier. Mm-hmm. Because again, I mean, I would prefer the moral complexity, the idea that these robots are getting so desperate that they're doing this, but now it's kind of like, okay, now the robots aren't as good, but
yeah, aside from infantilizing the robots, it also cartoonizes the U.S. military.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah,
but then Taylor rescues Alfie, and one of the things that Washington does in the movie that I like is that he doesn't overplay the transition he's undergoing.
Right.
And it makes it so much more believable. He goes from not really liking robots, viewing them as just programming. There's like a scene where he's first talking to Drew, where he refers to Alfie in the feminine before he corrects himself to talking about her in the third about it.
As an it.
Yeah, as an it. But then when he rescues Alfie from Haroon, instead of shooting Haroon or destroying Haroon, he simply turns Haroon off, or no, not off. Puts him in standby mode.
Yeah.
And so,
which is a big setup for later.
Yeah, it's a big setup. Exactly. So he's trying to rescue Alfie, but then Howell shows up with the U.S. Army.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, again, the visual sense here is so great. This, how you hear things, you see trees falling, you see contrails of rockets going, and then this gigantic, it's not even a tank, it's like a mobile fortress.
Yeah.
And and I love how it is the coloring, the fact that it's not camouflage, it stands out. It's even got U.S. Army on it in kind of semi-friendly letters.
Yeah.
And it just sticks out like a sore thumb, and it is so well done.
Yeah.
The whole sequence is just amazing. It's the kind of thing that kind of put me back in love with the film again a little bit.
Yeah.
Especially when, and I don't know how you feel about these things, but there's this, when the battle's happening, it's very one-sided, and they're preparing to storm the robot's position, and they unveil these autonomous bombs, and it is so well done. Howell's in the tank and you got these autonomous bombs, and they're basically like trash cans with arms and legs.
Right.
And you turn them on, and you set it.
Run.
Yeah, they run. And it was, and I didn't really fully appreciate until I rewatched it, is they programmed the first one. And it's like, okay, 30 seconds, now go. And the robot's like taking a second to kind of process the programming. And they're like, go. And then it takes a second to say, it's something like, it's been an honor to serve with you.
Yeah.
And there's so much there that is just so well done in that moment. And again, it makes me just so much angry about that earlier scene where it's kind of like, even the American robots have kind of this element of identity, and the Americans are still treating them like they're bullets.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, it's been an honor to serve with you.
Yeah.
And it has this clunky thing running off.
Yeah.
And it was so unnecessary because you think about it, where they could, they have all these missiles and everything. They could have done so much of it with something that's so unanthropomorphized. I know I'm mispronouncing that word. And yet it's just so humorous the way it's kind of, this thing kind of goes clunking in, squats down, kaboom.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they send off a second bomb, and it's running towards the robots and the simulants, and Alfie shows up because she wants to help.
Yeah.
And it's like the bomb almost, it kneels before her. And again, it underscores the sense that she's almost like a god. Mm-hmm. And deactivates, and all the robots and simulants are just kind of staring at each other. And then McBride shows up and he shoots Alfie because that's what McBride does.
Yeah.
And this is where you see Taylor's transition completed. He shoots a human. He shoots McBride, a former member of the team. He never really liked McBride, didn't know McBride, but still, I mean, he's shooting another American. Yeah,
that's probably the most powerful way that they could have pulled off that character arc of it's based around this girl that he's connected with now. Mm-hmm. Of that's why he's doing this. It's for her. He's not just like, he hasn't reasoned in his head, oh, it looks like the AI side is better, I'm going to switch with them. It's an emotional, in the moment, dramatized moment. Oh, you shot my girl, I'm going to shoot you. So.
And it also underscores, it also is what convinces Haroon to let him go see Maya. Taylor and Alfie take into this temple area.
Yeah.
Where, and on the way, Haroon tells Taylor that Alfie is more than just Maya's creation. Alfie is modeled after the unborn daughter who died in the attack 5 years ago.
Joshua's unborn daughter.
Yeah, Joshua's unborn daughter with Maya. And which in effect, of course, makes her Taylor's sort of standing
actual daughter.
Yeah. So he's kind of rocked by this. And then he's rocked by another piece of information, which is that it turns out that Maya is alive.
Right.
But she has been in a coma ever since the Nomad strike. So for 5 years, she's actually been hooked up to all these machines, and it's such great visual presentation. She's basically at the center of a temple, and the robots and simulants, they can't turn off the machines.
Yeah.
And it's that they literally can't. They need Taylor to do that.
Those robot monks are so cool.
Yeah.
And seeing like the robots on the shrines, it's like, oh, like it's, I don't know. It's good world building of.
It is.
Yeah.
There's so much world building, and I think this is where I do have to give Edwards credit. He doesn't sit there and have to spell it all. He doesn't have to have people drop in these clunky explainers. He just trusts the fact that there is an explanation and that people aren't going to go around and comment on it because that's just the world in which we live. Just in the same way that we don't have to sit there and say, oh, look, that's an internal combustion engine automobile there. Or, oh, that's a jet that's flying people because we take passengers by air nowadays.
Yeah, it's just part of the world.
That part that I find so irritating is that there's so much in this that is so well done, so well realized, and yet the core thing that around which the entire story is built, it's just it feels like it's fumbled. So
yeah.
But just as Taylor turns off Maya's life support, guess who shows up to save the day but the United States cavalry?
Yeah.
with Nomad hovering over the skies, and you have this attack upon the temple. And Howl shows up. She shoots Haroon, and she's like, okay, now, she's okay. Here we have Maya, so we know we've gotten Namada. So let's go ahead and take the girl back. And then Haroon shoots one of the bombs at Howl.
Onto her. Yeah,
yeah. And the scene is just so well done that Alfie does her thing, and she's doing it to save Howl. And
the soldiers are like, what is she doing?
And you get the impression it might have been a perception altering moment for Hal. But then Raids basically screw it up by threatening her. And so Alfie hides and breaks the connection, and Hal and the soldiers go boom. But then, of course, Taylor's escaping and with Alfie, and he's intercepted by other American soldiers, and they take them both into custody. And here is where the movie degenerates for me. And it becomes such a typical Hollywood movie.
Yeah, let me cover a point real quick before you get to that. The shot with all the monks lined up, the robot monks, and where they're just execution style shooting them. It's what I mean by blatant emotional manipulation. It's like, okay, there was absolutely no reason for them to be shooting monks. They weren't firing at them. You're just doing that to show they bad guys.
I mean, it works in the story in the sense that if the United States has decided that all AI, all robots are by definition bad, then that happens. But you're right. From a storytelling perspective.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
But you're right. It didn't need to happen. It just kind of underscores the notion of the United States as the bad guys.
Right.
But then you get this, it's almost this cartoonish action sequence that's preceded by the fact that Alfie is in custody at in a U.S. Army facility, and they're going to destroy her.
Right.
But for some reason, they let Taylor do it, and they explain why, which is that Alfie is refusing to let them use these supposedly more humane methods of destroying her. But she'll let Taylor use this EMP gun. And the general, the bad guy General Andrews is like, well, we're going to go ahead and let him do it and we're going to encourage him to do it because otherwise we'll have to use less humane means.
Right.
Okay. If you believe robots are evil, why are you treating
them humanely? Yeah.
And if
you don't think they're human, why do you treat them humanly?
And if you doubt Taylor's loyalty, as Andrews so obviously does, then why do you let him do it? And so then, but okay, we're going to ignore that.
Right.
But then so Taylor goes in there and he, supposedly shoots her with a gun. So she's now deactivated. And we're going to take her to a facility to incinerate her. And we're going to go ahead and not just are we going to let Taylor come with us, we're going to let him ride in the same vehicle as Alfie. I'm like, really?
Kind of convenient.
Yeah, a little too convenient.
Yeah.
We don't trust this guy, but sure, we'll go ahead and let him do this. And only as we are on our way will we sit here and review the footage of him doing it to find out that Alfie hasn't been terminated. She is just on standby mode and turns back on and halts the convoy. And of course, it's right next to the spaceport where they can hop on the lunar shuttle, which she can magically commandeer to go to Nomad so they can start Nomad. And this is the point where I'm starting to beat my head against the back of the couch because I'm like, it was so, the first 2-3 quarters of this movie were so much better than this.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, it just drove me batty. And of course, it was one of those things where it's like, well, let's do this. And then Alfie just does her prayer thing, and all of a sudden they can't do that. And, we're going to do this. And then Alfie does her prayer thing, and all of a sudden the shuttle's docking. It's just so, it's again, she has these godlike powers until the very end when they're trying to escape and they have this remote control robot trying to stop her. And some reason she can't just, turn that off.
Right.
So I could froth the mouth a little bit more if you like. It's just, and things, it's something that really started to bother me more on second watching.
Right.
It's kind of like, you get that first glance. It's like, oh, okay, you're going with it because it's new. And it's like, when you know what's going to happen, you're watching like, oh, wait a minute. Really? We're going to have these guys being that dumb because that's what we need to move the plot to this point?
Okay, I should have led up to this.
Sorry.
But it's my fault for not leading up to this. At the inciting incident, you ask the dramatic question, which is, for this movie, is he going to find his wife? So the inciting incident is when they show him the hologram of his wife still alive. And he's like, okay, I'm going to go get her. When he finds her in the shrine at the end of Act 2, that's when that question is answered. The end of Act 2 is when you answer that question. And then into Act 3, you take it on a bigger conflict that has been building up to that point. So
to be clear, Act 1 is up to him finding Alfie. Act 2 is basically that entire journey up to Hal's death and then being picked up by the military.
Yes.
And then that's interesting because I just didn't quite appreciate how I was kind of, as I was watching, I was kind of thinking, okay, they're like 4 or 5 acts here, but you're right. So basically this movie, the bulk of it is just Act 2.
Yeah, that's how most movies go. I mean, that's structure. Act 2 is twice the length of Act 1 and also twice the length of Act 3. It's the first 25 is Act 1, middle 50 is Act 2, last 25 is Act 3.
See, and I think maybe that's part of the issue with this movie, which is that ratio seems much more disproportionate. It's more like
it probably is. It's a very long movie, but usually I don't know.
You get 20 minutes of Act 1, and then it's like the next hour and a half is Act 2. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why I find Act 3 so frustrating. Because
could have used more of the wife at the beginning for that.
And they could have played out the events at the end in Act 3 a lot more dramatically, with a lot more suspense,
right? Because
it's just so rushed, and the music kind of prods it along too. It's like, oh, they're in the shuttle. Oh, it's like we're gonna stop them, and then you get this, this soaring thing, and all of a sudden, no, she's done the prayer thing and she's fixed it.
And there's also some more blatant bad guying of they kill their own soldiers in the airlock, and it's like, there's no reason for this.
No, I thought.
I don't know. I
thought Taylor did that. Well, when they're on board the shuttle and Taylor opens the hatch and the soldiers go floating out. But there may have been like a second one. But then they're like evacuating. It's just a mess.
It's a muddle. That's what I mean about storytelling. Of like, if the storytelling is good, Act 3, when you remember it, should be crystal clear. This is kind of muddled.
Yeah.
So.
Because there's a lot of rushing around, and there's a lot of, the ticking clock of the fact that because they're on board Nomad, they're going to go ahead and launch this attack early. So all these missiles are soaring out.
I did like them carrying on the metaphor of Nomad being heaven, though. She meets his wife there, and the final goodbye to his daughter. He's like, I'm going. Sorry, it's making me emotional. That's good storytelling. He's like, I'm going to heaven because of you. Yes. And then shoots her off. I really hate this trope of the hero sacrificing themselves in the third act. They do this horribly in the theatrical cut of I Am Legend. And I'm sure there's a million other movies they do this, but they did it as well as they could here. So,
yeah. And not to say Washington sells it.
Right.
Again, he's a good performer. I think it remains to be seen if he's quite as good as his dad, but he is he just does such a good job this movie. Again, my issues with the movie are so tied to the story and the writing.
Right.
The VFX is 10 out of 10. The acting, be it the stars, Washington, Janney, Watanabe, and these more obscure people, they all do a great job.
Yeah.
Even the girl, I can't remember her name, but she does a really good job.
Pretty good child acting.
Yeah, exactly. And they make elements of the story work that it's a good thing they did, because the story wasn't helping them.
No, it wasn't. It was kind of just pull out the trope box, boop, 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 boop. The thing that did make it work for me is the relationship with him and the daughter. Mm-hmm. And it's great that it ended up being her own, or his own, basically half daughter, but his daughter.
But he makes it convincing. He makes that evolution in his feelings, not just to her, but towards AI more generally, more convincing.
Right.
And I think they underscore that nicely when the military is you basically taken out the monks. They've destroyed the monastery. And then, of course, to seal the deal, they're probably just going to drop a missile on it to make sure they got everyone. And as they're hauling off Taylor, he has a soldier. They've separated Taylor from Alfie, and the soldier's trying to calm him down by saying, it's just programming, just programming.
Yeah.
And how he's now undergone
that part hit me. I was not connecting with the relationship with him and her is what sold that for me. I did not connect with the AIs besides that, but him saying it's just programming that hit. And then the other thing that hit for me was them separating from his daughter that hit hard.
Yeah. It was a nicely done sequence, and it was done in a way that completed his arc of becoming a advocate of the AI.
Also, the dramatic question ends exactly where the end of his arc ends. I mean, that structure wise, that's how it works. End of Act 2, and so it's right there when they take her from him. That's when Act 3 begins.
And this is one of the reasons.
And she becomes the MacGuffin for Act 3. So,
and this is one of the reasons why I get so angry about that part that I have an issue with, because it's not amateurish. It's not great, but it's professionally done.
Yeah.
And it's like, it just makes me a little more frustrated that they do
it's kind of just functional. Like,
yes, it is.
And you want the end of the movie to be like transcendent.
Yes.
Not to pitch
it's
my own
a good word that we can use in all sorts of ways.
Yeah. But it's just kind of by the numbers.
Yeah.
So
So
not a bad movie though.
No,
it's
not.
Very well made. And the biggest takeaway for it with me is just on such a low budget, Hollywood needs to take note of this. With this and Godzilla -1, lower budget is coming and the tide needs to change.
And you can do quality first-rate stuff with those lower budgets.
Yeah. And they shot this on a $4,000 camera, which you can buy at Best Buy. It's the Sony FX3. And it's actually got me interested in getting it for my next one. So
every once in a while, two films will share a bond to transcend time, space, and even genre. These similarities go down to their DNA. So let's dissect and deconstruct, compare and contrast. It's time to go crisscross.
Crisscross.
Well, I think that for a lot of listeners, they will have picked up on the most obvious comparison between the two, which is what marked out for me the value of featuring these two.
right.
It's something that is overt in 25th Hour for reasons that we've already outlined. It is, I would argue, a bit more subtle in the creator, because rather than making it overtly about 9/11, they use a substitute. And it's something that is obvious if you pick up on certain signs. For example, early on when you see Taylor back in Los Angeles and he's working in the LA site, they refer to it as Ground Zero.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's just one line throwaway, but it is nonetheless one that implies maybe a similar formulation. And much in the same way that you see the people, the crew on the Ground Zero site in 25th Hour, picking up the remains and everything, they're still doing that in Los Angeles, which is what Taylor's been employed to do.
Yeah.
So, but it's also different in that you're seeing, and this is what to me makes the comparison so fascinating. You're seeing America's engagement with 9/11 and its aftermath at two different points in time.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, 25th Hour is in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. And I think it's one of the reasons why it is such a valuable film, because to do a film like that again, if you were to do it shot for shot, it would be too much of a pose. It would be too artificial. It would not have the rawness.
No, yeah, it would not. It's got the vibe of it in there.
And also, it can be made in 2002 without awareness of how it's going to change America.
Right.
And just in the same way that the movie ends with Monty going into the unknown future, 20 years later, we know what the future holds. And this is something that, to go to another example, you have Munich, Steven Spielberg's movie, which ends very knowingly on a shot of the World Trade Center, which implies that, this issue with, terrorism, the Middle East is going to have this impact down the road.
Right.
I mean, you don't have that in 25th Hour. You can't have that. And it's one of the things that I think makes it, such a great film.
Yeah, that's so brazen of them to be able to make it so fresh. Like it just happened. Like they're still cleaning up the wreckage of it. Yeah.
And so it's like we're able to examine the wound before it kind of scabs over.
Right.
So, and whereas with the creator, it's the whole war with AI is basically a stand-in for where we are as a nation and as a world 2 decades on.
Yeah.
And the sense of how, how the United States has been viewed by this, how we are seeming engaged in this forever war where the goalposts keep moving. And one of the things that really kind of made this stand out for me was when I was watching the movie for the first time and you see the first shots of Nomad. Mm-hmm. And it reminded me of something I heard on a television program years ago. The reporter was in Pakistan.
Yeah.
And they were interviewing villagers. And they were commenting about how they could always hear the American Predator drones overhead, even if they couldn't see them.
Uh-huh.
About how the Predator drones were always overhead, always hanging over them as this threat, and they never knew when those drones would unleash a missile and hit a target somewhere in their neighborhood.
Right.
And Edwards does, you don't hear Nomad. It's one of the things I think is great about, because he's playing to his strengths, but you see it. And
well, I mean, there's the bit of that robotic or the ironic, or that sound that precedes it. That's like, true.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's not like something flying overhead, but anyway. Yeah.
Well, the other sound, of course, is the sound when you have the targeting. And it's one of those other things where it's like, the more you think about it, the more you're thinking that can't possibly be realistic. But when you see the great visual of those, of the targeting system.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Oh, it'd be the foam, 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 foam. Yeah, it's a sound I kind of associated a bit with like Tron. It's a very technological sound.
Oh, it's true. Yeah.
But it's one of the reasons why I watch when that thought occurred to me, I ended up watching the rest of the movie as this commentary on America, in the wake of 9/11. And it's not the only film like that. You have some very overt ones like, say, Zero Dark 30 and the bomb one that Jeremy Renner did that I can never think of off the top of my head.
Oh, I know. Hurt Locker.
Yeah. And they tell stories about, how we've changed as a result of it, but, make it science fiction, make it metaphor, and make it with that perspective. And this is where I, again, go back to that point about it that I hate, which is, again, how the moral absolutes that
robots are completely innocent and we're U.S. is completely cartoonish bad guy.
Yeah. Which again is not definitively established, but it didn't even need to be there in the first place.
Yeah.
We can easily sit here and say that an AI was bad and that doesn't make all AIs bad, but now we have to go ahead and argue that all AIs are good and we're just basically engaging in our own little crusade against them because that's what America does.
Yeah.
So I mean, in that sense, it is very much a critique. But there's also a second element that I didn't really fully appreciate until I was reviewing these, which is a more timeless message, I think, of change. Mm-hmm. And you see it in 25th Hour, which is that how they are on the cusp of an event that everyone knows is going to change them. Even though Frank and I can't think of Philip Seymour Hoffman's character's name.
Oh yeah, Jacob.
For some reason, I think Joshua.
Yeah.
Frank and Jacob and Naturel and Monty's dad Steve. That even though none of them are going to prison, all of them are going to be changed by Monty's departure in various ways.
Yeah.
A friendship is going to fall apart. A father's going to see his son, go into a system where he can't protect him. Naturel's losing a man that she deeply cares for, and that was her step out of her family life that she now has to go back into.
Yeah.
And so in a sense, in that sense, they're all about to be changed forever by this event that's about to take place. It's looming over them. And and then you get to the creator, and there is this idea of how we're either adapting or resisting to change.
Mm-hmm.
And this point starts to be made with the speech that Howell gives about the Neanderthals.
Yeah.
And it plays up through the movie the idea that AI has somehow adapted more successfully, and that there are humans who've adapted more successfully than the main characters, in a sense that Taylor doesn't have that adaptation until it's personalized for him by the fact that basically his surrogate daughter, he discovers he has a surrogate daughter in the form of this. And it is this broader question of, how well, going back to the AI thing, how well are we going to adapt? Are we going to be able, as AI presents us with a challenge where they're no longer just a tool, where they're no longer just a tin can bomb that we can just order and they'll gladly go off and have themselves be killed? Are we going to adapt to that successfully? Are we going to be able to integrate them? Can we accept them as equals? Mm-hmm. Or are we going to be, no, we're going to eradicate them. We're going to excise them from our existence. And I mean, it's you could frame it in all sorts of other ways, but it really is it is a timeless challenge. How do we, as individuals, as communities, as societies, adapt to change that you cannot resist?
Yeah.
And you have this very personal examination of that in one movie, and the same question on a broader scale in the other one. Yeah.
Cool. That's some connections I would have never seen. That I see that though. That's cool.
Yeah.
I really like how 25th Hour handles the 9/11. And it's bizarre that it's like right when it happened, and that's probably why it's handled so reverently. It's haunting in the effect in the movie, but they don't ever use it in a
exploitative.
In an exploitative way.
Yeah, and I think that's entirely down to Spike Lee. Right. Spike Lee is, he's been controversial. He has been he's made some films that people have not always responded to well. But for all of that, and for all the stances he sometimes has taken that have set people off, you can never doubt his love for New York.
Yeah.
And it is, I think the only way something like that could have worked is with someone who had a relationship where they can appreciate New York's flaws and not go totally into over sentimentalizing it as something that looks really fake, with the passage of time. But at the same time, from a place of heart, really express genuine pain and grief about what has happened.
Yeah. It would be kind of interesting to compare like World Trade Center and like Flight
93.
Flight 93.
Mm-hmm.
That could be an interesting episode. I have a feeling of which one I'd like better because, I'm a big Paul Greengrass fan, but yeah. Mm-hmm. Now let's get to our star ratings. Let's start with 25th Hour. I'll start with mine. I'll give it 4 stars. The filmmaking is, I was going to say perfect. Like it's very, very good. Content wise, I don't think I'll be watching it again, but it is very well made.
For me, 25th Hour is, I guess at the end of the day, I have to make it a 5-star film.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a film that I seek out and rewatch.
Right.
I saw it in the theater when it came out, and until I proposed it, I hadn't seen it since. And part of it is maybe because it's not as frequently shown, it's not as prominent and in the discourse and available. But at the same time, I never felt the need to seek it out. And in that sense, it's not a entertaining movie in the sense of
for sure. It's a very depressing movie.
But it is such a great work of art.
Yeah.
It is. Sure. It's masterfully done. Spike Lee is at the top of his game. He's working with a great story, and he is working with a great team of actors.
Yeah,
who there's not a bad performance in that bunch.
Yeah, it's too bad Philip Seymour Hoffman isn't still with us, but yeah. Okay, let's move on to our star rating of the creator. Okay, I will give it 3 stars. It's a solid movie, but the storytelling is just subpar for me. The visuals are spectacular, but I think the thing that really holds it together for me is that relationship between him and Elfie.
Yeah. I think for me, I'm going to be right there with you on 3 stars. I mean, when I first saw it, I thought of it as more of a 4-star movie. And I think really my rating is more like 3.5 stars. But again, I'm trying to walk away from that. I say at the end of the day, I got to bump it down to 3 stars because, and the thing is that I think of the film more in terms of positives than negatives for all the reasons we described.
Right.
The acting is good. The visuals are great. There's just so much that is well done. And yet I get so hung up on the basicness of the story.
It's a good movie for a lot of different reasons, but yeah.
It's just those are the elements that they aren't Edwards' strengths.
Yeah,
and maybe a better writer could have created a true masterpiece.
Yeah,
but you know what? If that was the worst film on my resume, I would not be ashamed.
Yeah, and it's going to have a great impact on film.
Yeah,
overall. So.
And I also think it's going to be one that people are going to return to over time, much as they have, I think, with Rogue One, and appreciate its strengths more than its weakness. But one thing that kind of surprised me, I remember thinking when I saw it, I was leaving the theater thinking, this film's going to do better abroad than it did in the United States. Mm-hmm. And the box office proved me right, but not as right as I thought I was going to.
Yeah, it didn't do too bad in the U.S.
It didn't do too badly. I mean, but at the same time, I was expecting it to connect more with audiences, because I really do think that, and again, I keep returning to that amazing imagery of Nomad. He captures with imagery what I think Americans don't appreciate or don't grasp even when they're being told it. But I'm thinking, how would Americans feel if there was, say, a Chinese battle station constantly hovering over the United States? I mean, look how we freaked out over a balloon. And to think that, 6 days out of 7, it's just hovering there. It does nothing most of the time, but there's
the power of life or death hovering above you.
Yeah, the visual of it constantly able to exact judgment. I really do think that Edwards captured with that, and I think being not an American but an Englishman, he has a bit of perspective on this, but he captures something there that, to me, is just. Is both I think a testament to his, his visual style, but also his sense of perspective that I don't think American filmmakers have really, been able to capture with that. Right. But it is very much something that is a direct consequence of this horrific event in 2001 and the legacy it cast. I mean, it shows how here we are over 2 decades later, and we're still making films that reflect just how much 9/11 and its aftermath continue to impact us.
Yeah.
So, but at the end of the day, got to give it 3 stars.
Yeah. Most movies are middle of the pack. So, Okay. So our next episode will be our first direct sequels, The Fugitive and U.S. Marshals. And Fugitive is one of my favorite movies. So
Same here.
Looking forward to it.
I'm still waiting to meet the person who will say that about U.S. Marshals.
Yeah. Yeah. You kind of caught my vibe for it, but yeah.
But we'll have to see how it holds up in the rewatch, especially.
Yeah, we'll see.
I've never watched the 2 of them in sequence, and it'd be interesting to see exactly what are the differences between the 2.
Yeah. And the great Robert Downey Jr. in a forgotten role in one of them. So.
Yeah.
If you'd like to get access to bonus features and deleted clips from Criss Cross or our sister show, Fast as a Story, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Transcend Entertainment. That's TRANSCEND Entertainment. Okay, so that is our episode for today. Thanks for listening to the Criss Cross Cinema Podcast.
But you wouldn't clap yet, because making something disappear isn't enough. You have to bring it back.